Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Petr Karel. I'm a vice chair of the British Chamber of Commerce. What I do for a living is a structure and export finance in the company called London Market. I would like to welcome you on this first Sustainability Working Group meeting. Now, sustainability has got many meanings and many scientific definitions. When I looked up various things and bits and pieces, I actually came with this pretty simple picture. It's starting with triple P, people, planet, and profit. And there's got to be some equilibrium in between these three. And one of the reasons why we're here, we should try to find ways and paths to find this equilibrium, both from the financial, technological, and human point of view. Before we start, I would like to ask our sponsors, and I'd like to thank them for coming. It's Česká spořitelna that will become a partner of the Sustainability Group, and Matuš Půl, representative of the spořitelna, who is a Chief Sustainability Officer in Česká spořitelna, is here. I would like to thank Ernst & Young, who will provide mostly professional cover and knowledge and expertise and support us in that respect in this project. And I'd like to welcome you all in this event because it's great to see so many people and good to see that actually the community already exists and you know each other pretty well. Now, before we start in my little presentation, I would like to welcome our panelists, of course, Mr. Petr Dvořák, who is the CEO of Vodafone, who is a keynote speaker. Tereza Bušková from DIT, which is basically, I always explain that as something like Ministry of Trade or Ministry of Foreign Affairs combined within the British government. So the Department of International Trade, and she's a head of Czech Republic office, right? Tereza, that's it. Alice Machová, who's a partner of Ernst & Young, specializing in sustainability, mainly reporting, but she will tell you more herself. And I always forgot your name, Mildorfová Lvington. Julia is a Czech-based Brit who we were not aware of. We've only found out recently when we talked to the Institute of Global Change, Ústav globální změny, and then we found out there is a British person who actually deals with these issues, which is a great surprise. And also Julia is quite happy to join the community and the British people around in the city because she only came 2 years ago when COVID started, so didn't have a chance to interact too much. And I think that's it. So to set a floor why we're here, a couple of very simplistic pages, if you allow me, but just to give you an idea where we stand and why we're here. If you could. So sustainability now becomes a paramount for everyone, for every big company, and will become very important and key for SMEs and even small companies going forward. And because the British government, or UK government, shall I say, is very active, and with the COP26 and Glasgow agenda, it's a natural link to put British Chamber of Commerce and the British Embassy and the government together and work on some pretty innovative and forward-looking solutions and initiate the discussion and movement. And frankly speaking, government in this country wasn't too keen to move as quickly, as swiftly as we probably need in this era. So let's hope that the new government will be slightly more receptive. Now, what we want to do within this group is to put together people from industry, business, finance, academia, government, to think of solutions for the future. So we want to initiate the discussion and bring people around the table and come up with some good ideas. Next one, please. I don't know how much you can see out of this, but the most obvious thing is the carbon dioxide deposits and carbon dioxide emissions. And if you look at the 1950s and the 2020, it's 5, 6, 7 times higher emissions that we produce in the last couple of years. Now, very nice reflection with the global temperatures, where the temperatures were highest last year from the time when the measurements started. So highest ever, and on the average is 1.5 Celsius. Now, what are the results of such change? Next one, please, if I may. The most obvious one is, most impactful, is the global warming and the situation with the Arctic ice, a permafrost. So the Arctic zone is becoming warmer twice the pace as the normal land areas, resulting in thawing of the icebergs and Arctic ice. So if today we have got 420 carbon dioxide particles per million in the atmosphere, that is the same as had 4 million years ago, when sea levels were 25 meters higher than today because of warming. So this is the map of the impacted coastlines. This is a simulation how Europe would look like if we get to numbers like that. So no Berlin, no Denmark, no Belgium, no Netherlands, no London, etc., etc. So it's a very powerful argument. Next one, please. Economic losses that drive quite often our determination whether we need to do or we don't need to do anything. And I worked also with the insurance and the reinsurance industry, and the data that the reinsurance industry has is quite alarming. So the losses that were paid by the reinsurance industry in the 80s on the catastrophic losses, which is fire, hurricanes, floods, what have you, were around $500 billion. Now it's 1,500 billion. So it's much higher, again, over 2 or 3 decades. And you can actually feel that many risks are becoming uncoverable, uninsurable, because the insurance companies wouldn't insure some projects in impacted areas. This is, again, one of the indexes that Swiss Re, that is one of the biggest reinsurers, have produced. And we in Europe, we always say, oh, nothing to do with us. We've got no problem, especially here in the Czech Republic. And if you actually look at our country and Poland, we are perceived as one of the least resilient countries in Europe in relation to climate change and the climate economics. And we could see that this year with the tornado that we experienced for the first time, and the losses were tremendous. It was billions. So this is just to set the floor for the discussion, and you will hear a little more from me towards the end. And I would like now to ask Teresa to tell us something about the British government priorities.
Okay, can you hear me well? Thanks very much, Petr, for your introduction. And also thank you very much that you've mentioned actually why I am here. Apparently most of you know that the UK is hosting this COP26 conference in Glasgow end of November. And this is basically why we are paying high attention to promotion of the sustainability agenda and why we are participating and hosting number of events related to this. I mean, wherever I come, I always get the question, so what are actually the UK targets for the COP26 conference? What is it you want to achieve? What is it you want to take away? So that's why I prepared just a very quick summary of these. I mean, it's, as you can see, it's 4 targets, very simple, very easy to be understood, even though I wouldn't say it will be easy to achieve them. I mean, the very first one is, I think the obvious one is this kind of mitigation, which actually means securing the global net zero by 2050 latest. But in fact, what it means, like our target is not only to having the countries participating in the climate conference to commit to the target per se, but also, you know, to adopt long-term strategies how to achieve this target. I mean, we do strongly believe that there are actually 3 major areas where which need high attention to be able to achieve this net zero. And it's basically clean transport, it's limitation of deforestation, and it's limitation of coal use. So these are the areas where we will want to push the countries to make commitments in, for example, no new coal power plant, etc. And this is how we would like to achieve this first target. Then the second one, which is called adaptation, is basically about how we as communities need to adapt to make sure we are accepting the challenge and we are able to work around it. The key statement is basically this, the climate change is happening here and now, so we shouldn't wait with the action. We need to work on it together. And in order to be able to achieve the commitment, the target number 1, we need to share our best practices. We need to learn from each other. We need to make sure that the communities are cooperating closely to be able to achieve the net zero. Then the third one, which I would say is maybe even the most important one, is how we're going to secure finance to achieve the target. Because we all know that the global economies, the countries are in various positions. We have developed countries, we have developing countries. As Petr has shown on his map, some of them are going to be impacted more by what's happening right now. Some others are going to be impacted less. So we just need to be sure that there is some proper balance in the global world, that there is enough finance collected for those countries which will need a bit more help, a bit more transformation. I think some of you may remember that basically during the climate change conference in Paris, there was this kind of commitment saying that it should be raised annually $100 billion to prepare the fund, basically to have enough money for investing into clean projects, renewable projects, sustainable projects. We are not there so far. I think in 2020, it was still roughly $20 billion missing annually. So what we are planning to do is basically to support the countries to commit to their contribution into this. And also, it's not only about mobilizing public finance, apparently, such as all these development banks and similar institutions, but it's also to stress the private finance resources to make sure, again, what Petr has mentioned, that it's going to be very difficult to ensure projects which are not sustainable. It's going to be very difficult to finance them by a loan, because this is how we are building this kind of bottom-up. And then the very last one, again, is to some extent back to the second one, is about collaboration, working together, how we need to negotiate to make the deal kind of acceptable for all the parties, and to make sure we are able to go ahead all together. So I think this is it about the COP26 targets. I mean, just very briefly from my side, I mean, it's a great pleasure to see you all here. I mean, I see representatives from, you know, multiple companies, large multinationals as well as few smaller Czech ones. I see multiple sectors. I see British-run businesses as well as Czech-run businesses. I think all of this is very important because, as Petr has mentioned, apparently the Czech Republic, for example, compared to the UK, is not the country which is really kind of leading by example in adaptation of climate-favored policies, etc. And I think saying this A, we also need to say the B, namely that the starting positions of these two countries are completely different. If I just name like 3 major aspects, right, then the first one is probably going to be the very high coal dependency. I mean, the UK has exited coal already in 1970s, at least with respect to production, which is not the case here. Also, apparently, you have very, very different natural conditions, and in relation to this, you have very different use of renewables. I think the Czech Republic will never have like huge offshore wind farms, which will produce like 40 or 50% of their energy consumption. And the third one, which I think, again, we can all see, but probably not everyone is aware of, is that right now in the Czech Republic, the share of manufacturing on our GDP is roughly 30%, while in the UK it's 10% only. So the services play a much higher role in the UK, and for the Czech Republic, the transformation will be more core in the industry and in manufacturing, which is somewhat different, and it's one of the reasons why there are companies here which are afraid of making these steps. So I think it's very important, you know, to have basically to build communities which are able to lead by examples, to support also local medium-sized and smaller companies to achieve the sustainability goals. Because we as the British Embassy, we are very often collecting feedback from businesses which are working with the UK, for example, exporting to the UK. And we can already hear from some Czech local businesses that they struggle to some extent with the requirements their UK customers are imposing on them, being it carbon audits, being it decarbonization plans, etc. And I assume that these requirements will kind of cascade. I mean, it will not stay with the kind of major suppliers, but it will cascade to the sub-suppliers and their sub-suppliers. And then basically, if the local companies fail to adapt to this like new sustainable world, they will probably fail and they will not stay as competitive as they are now. So I think whatever we can do, I mean, we as the embassy, for example, as I've mentioned at the beginning, we are doing plenty of events. We have just launched a green tech event, a green tech competition for startups, which are expected to come up with their green solutions. They have a special prize to be won. We will be launching a Race to Zero competition soon, which will be targeting rather medium and smaller size companies, again, to join this Race to Zero initiative. But whatever we can do, us as the embassy, the BCC here, or any of your businesses, this kind of leading of example, sharing best practices and educating the environment here can be actually viewed as kind of making this country a better place to live, which we think is extremely important. I think it's great that we are part of this. Thank you very much for coming, and I'm very much looking forward to our cooperation.
Thank you very much, Terezo. I'm glad to hear that Embassy will support our efforts. So I'm sure that, for example, one of our last meetings could be held in the Embassy and the beautiful gardens of the British Embassy. Now, I would like to invite Petr Dvořák, CEO of Vodafone, who will give you his views and Vodafone's views to sustainability.
Děkuji. Good afternoon. And I can't resist to open with at least a little bit of a joke, because I feel after the opening and then the difficult journey that it's really necessary, because I think that we cannot enjoy such difficult topics as let's say sustainability and climate change without a little bit of let's say humor. And the humorous fact, looking at Richard came in the morning, because normally in Vodafone we are quite informal and normally we go in jeans, so I came in the office in the morning in suits and everybody was looking to have an interview, so should we get ready for a change or something? I said, no, I'm attending a serious topic conference or kickoff in the afternoon, which concerns sustainability. So obviously it is an important topic and quite, I would say, at heart for all the Vodafone people. But I think we should really kind of embrace it with the optimism ahead of us, and don't start with, it's tough, it's really going to, if we don't move, something bad is going to happen, because then we end up in debates whether really something bad is going to happen and how bad that bad is going to be. Let's rather focus really on transforming ourselves and transforming the journey. And I think it all kind of starts with purpose. And at Vodafone, we have a purpose that we believe that we are not here just to sell services, but to connect people and technologies to create something better. And I think whenever we have a purpose, as people, as individuals, as companies, achieving and overcoming difficult things is easier. And I'm quite proud to work for a company and which kind of is trying to translate that purpose into actionable topics. These are the topics that we strive for at Vodafone. Of course, digital society is not a surprise because everybody can imagine that Vodafone is a company that is an enabler for digitizing of the society. Also, inclusion is quite an important topic for us, and not only in the Czech Republic, where you can see us champion LGBT plus community, we also champion different types of inclusions. We fight for or against domestic violence, for equal opportunities, and these are things which are really dear to our heart. And the last one is a planet. And of course, surprisingly, some can doubt whether Vodafone is the big company kind of with a chimney, smoky, that really should be concerned about sustainability and the planet. But we really believe that for us, it has two aspects. One is, of course, internal. You don't see it, but we are quite a big chimney that consumes a lot of energy. So it is important for us to reduce the energy ourselves, but also our technologies, our solutions can help enable our customers, our partners to reduce their carbon footprint and move towards the sustainable goals and business. And I think that really there are things changing which we in the companies should take benefit of. And the Endelman study from 2021 is showing that the governments are losing trust of people. And maybe it was COVID, maybe it was the populism that kind of took away a little bit of the trust that was remaining in some of the governments and gave it to corporations. And I'm sure you all remember 70s and 80s where corporations were, as institutions, let's say the carriers of values. And I'm quite happy to see that in the people's minds that corporations and companies are showing the way. Not only the individuals and the leaders who are representing the companies, but also, let's say, the purpose. And people are making choices based on these, let's say, values that the companies are trying to achieve and project into the society. So I think we should not waste this trust that's been kind of given to us by people. We should deserve it, and we should show them that with optimism, we can really move difficult items. We at Vodafone started really early, so now it's fancy and everybody tries to do really a lot of things concerning the carbon footprint and things concerning ESG in general. We already 10 years ago started to buy green energy, and I'm sure that we would all agree that 10 years ago everybody was asking questions, why do you buy it? It's just more expensive. So some things you can't really run with a business case. Some things you have to really run with that value, with that purpose in mind, that it really makes sense, and we are concerned about the planet. Now, of course, it's easy to persuade companies to buy green energy. There are different issues that we need to solve. And we also went further beyond just buying the green energy and trying to reduce our own consumption and increase the efficiency. So just for your imagination, 15 years ago, there was some consumption of energy that we had. There were no data transfers. There were just calls, and the number of users was, of course, much lower than today. But we only increased the energy consumption over these 15 years by 15%, which obviously didn't come on its own. It's been quite an investment behind the technologies, behind more efficient processes that we ran the company with. And we achieved this in the 15 years. In the last year, the data consumption increased by 70%, yet our energy consumption went up only by 3%. So we also on a daily basis are trying to learn and adopt and change the ways we work in order to really deliver the carbon footprint reduction that we are committed to fully net zero. But we also went big. Outside of our company, we were between the first companies who extended the sustainability codex to our suppliers. So we are also kind of measuring how sustainable our suppliers are, and we are making our supply decisions based on the sustainability of our partners. Of course, we are concerned about the footprint, not necessarily of our own production, because obviously we are not producing mobile phones, But at this point in time, there is roughly 10 million old mobile phones in the hands of Czech consumers, which obviously is a lot of waste. We call it e-waste, which we would like to recycle, reuse, and help consumers not only get rid of it, but also kind of get back the gold and whatever you can see inside. And those who were watching Olympics, you know that the medals were produced from the mobile phone. So there is quite a lot of things inside an old mobile phone, and of course technology. So as we are changing technologies, and not only because of the new 4Gs and 5Gs and 6Gs coming in, but also because of the energy consumption and efficiency, there is a lot of waste that we have, and we are fully committed to kind of bring it down so that we can really stand behind our commitment of becoming fully net zero company by 2040. And I think the platform of this BCC initiative will help going forward to create not only an inspiration and motivation for other companies, because I think it's quite easy between ourselves, because as I read the list of companies who are today attending, that these are companies who are already kind of persuaded, already on the way. I think our duty is really to enlarge the footprint of our initiatives, of our let's say efforts outside, to those who might not yet be fully persuaded or don't know how to do it, cannot find ways. And I would really kind of urge you and motivate you to not to just be a discussion platform. I think we can achieve more together. We can push it a little bit more and create perhaps at least something that we can serve to the government as a commitment and a request from them. And we were just debating when we came in here that we can also use the winning party's logo. It's time for a change, so let's also ask them what are they going to do and how they are going to help the companies to enable that change. And I would like to finish with one at least a little bit positive, because as I said, it's a difficult topic. Many companies are finding it really hard to find ways. And I think it's really about not trying to resolve the problem in itself, whether the climate is going to change or not, but really about trying to find different ways and different approaches to really kind of move the businesses and the ways we compete in the market in order really to change the way we operate in the market. And I would, in the last sentence, use our new slogan, which is "Together we can." And I really believe that together we can change the way we are living here on this planet, and we can really transform not only our companies, but our society's perspective on sustainability and help save planet. Thank you.
Petr, thank you very much. It was really good to hear that a good and systemically important company is already doing things that are addressing the sustainability, and yeah, we're here together to achieve something and perhaps to inspire government. Before we get into next round, we'll have two ladies presenting. I would like to do a bit of housekeeping. Now, you have these cards in front of you where there are 5 areas that we thought would be of interest for this group and would like to cover. Now, we need to narrow it down probably. We cannot boil the ocean, and we have to concentrate on certain topics. Would you please circle 3 out of 5 that would be of your interest and that we could then address later in more detail, and we will do a counting towards the end. And I have colleagues here, Pavel Fara and Sylvia over there, who will help us with that. Second point, Petr, will you be here after the session, or are you running out shortly? Because Q&A session, I just want to do after the presentations, so you'll still be with us. So we'll do the Q&A after all the presentations. Then we'll have a little more of housekeeping and sort of organizational stuff, what we do as a group going forward. And then there is a wine, coffee, what have you, at the end, at the corridors on the back. So with that, I would like to invite Alice Machová from Ernst & Young, EY, as they call it today, to give us a speech.
Thank you very much. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alica Machová. I'm a partner in EY, and I'm actually responsible for sustainability business services in EY, Czech Republic. I've been actually dealing with this topic and helping clients for quite some time now, about, let's say, 6 years. So I can say that I do have some experience with the Czech Republic, and I can see what the companies are already doing. But I have to say before I start that it's my pleasure to actually say that the whole movement, even in our country, has accelerated very rapidly within the last year. I mean, like the changes that we see and the approach from the companies, it's really encouraging, and it's great to see that. And let's maybe before I get into the presentation, I have a little quiz for you. So this is a very educated audience. So obviously everybody knows these acronyms, but do you have any tips? What's the difference between the two? So CSR obviously meaning the corporate social responsibility, and ESG, environmental, social, and governance. Anyone, any tips? I don't want a full definition, but what are some of the differences? Very good. Anybody else? The way stakeholders look at the company. Yeah, very good answer as well. Third tip, third comment. Okay, well, thank you very much, ladies, for that. So let's maybe look at some of the definitions, and there's a lot of text. But the main difference and the way I see it is that CSR is really a voluntary activity from the company, right? And it can be across all the aspects, environmental, social, etc., but it is volunteer, right? So that's something that we could have seen a lot of Czech companies, even in the past, actually, devoting a lot of time and funding to CSR. But what ESG actually is doing, it's much more business focused, I would say, and it's also focused on the stakeholders that you mentioned. It's something that's not voluntary anymore, it's regulated. So there is a lot of focus now to actually make sure that the companies can be measured on what they are doing in ESG and across the spectrum, yeah, and that they can be compared, and they can actually, if they commit to some, let's say, KPIs or something that they want to achieve, that it is something that can be measured, because what is measured gets actioned, right? So that's, I would say, the main focus of ESG and the way to look at it and why is it important. So if we can move on to the next slide, please. Here I wanted to cover some of the main things that are happening, but Petr presented it already very brilliantly in terms of the climate is changing. We can see a lot of now, let's say, disruption in prices of electricity, right? Materials pricing are increasing. We have problems with supply chains. So all these things are happening at once, and one can be very doomed by all this, as you mentioned as well. All of these things are, let's say, human-driven, and they have one thing in common. They are causing like a disruptive change in our society, right? What can we do about it? We all think that the sustainability and the way if companies start behaving more sustainability can bring us some, let's say, improvements. So let's move on to the next slide. It was mentioned here by Petr Dvořák as well that, for example, Vodafone and large companies abroad have been actually already focusing on sustainability for quite some time, right? Especially in the countries like UK or France, etc. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. Some companies maybe were using it more like, let's say, a bit more superficial act, and it wasn't fully incorporated in the strategies. Some companies were not acting on it, and some would even do some greenwashing activities, which is not something that obviously we want to see. But we all think that the time is changing now, that actually everybody is starting to take it seriously, and that now actually the time is here, and it's proven even by the different surveys that we do as EY. So we have different surveys from the global investors, and all the numbers are confirming that actually investors are taking the ESG strategies, the non-financial reporting, and the way companies are approaching this really seriously. Yeah, so some of the numbers we have here, that 90% of global institutional investors actually revise investments into companies based on their ESG factors. So this is already, again, hard numbers, something that's already happening and that is here. Okay. I wanted to today not to do like presentation on what we do in EY. Obviously, we do lots of projects on this, but to look at it more, let's say, philosophically, the type of companies, what we see, what and how they are actioning on ESG. We see currently 3 trends, and this is not just in the Czech Republic, but I would say across Europe. We see companies who currently still think that this is just a fad and it will pass, and they don't feel like they need to do anything, and they just, wait until this whole green madness disappears. There's still quite a lot of companies like that. Sorry, just. Then obviously you see some companies who start to do something, but they, let's say, stay on the surface of the whole movement, and they sort of pick bits and pieces that they like and that work for them, but might be a bit more, let's say, again, superficial. But obviously the third type, and I'm sure that all of us who are here are sort of considering this way, are already thinking about it like a transformation of a company. So something that I do not just on a paper, not just on site, something that I really implement into the strategy of a firm as such. And this is actually what I also do in my work. So you mentioned reporting. For me, reporting is actually at the end of it. Yeah, whatever we always start with, we always say start with the strategy, start how you can build it into your business model. Reporting and KPIs and all that comes after that. Okay. So here are some of the actions, and they were already mentioned here. And I just started describing one that I just talked about. Really think about what Petr as well said. What is the purpose of your company? And based on that, then think about what are the main areas that you as a company can affect, right? Be it environment, be it actually social aspects. If you are a technology company, maybe it's not CO2, but it can be, different social problems that we have in the Czech Republic, right? So think about it like more holistically, come up with the main topics for yourself, and based on that, develop the strategy. Let's move on. It was mentioned here, the funding as well. So I put it here on the slide because it definitely comes hand in hand, right? Because it's not, as I said before, it's not something like that is voluntarily done. Like we really need to have funding for it. We need to come up with business cases, right? The CFOs are asking, rightly so, like if I start implementing this, right, what is the business case? So they still ask about it, and they will be asking about it. So even if we have the strategy, everybody wants to know about the funding, right, and what can be done. And I think it's fair to say that obviously EU is finding this topic very important, and that's why there is currently so much funds coming from EU being transitioned to the Czech Republic. And it's not just on, I would say, the obvious suspects, but even things like digitalization, for example, in sustainability is something that can be funded through the funds. So currently we are actually helping a lot of companies just like identifying what are all the areas where you can get the funding, and it's obviously typically combined with a loan or something, but you can get a lot of funding from EU as well. And my last slide. So here I wanted to show that also as a company, we are not only supporting our clients, but obviously we want to go as an inspiration as well. So we were the first Big Four company who committed to be carbon neutral in 2020. And we now signed up for so-called science-based target initiative. So we want to be a net zero by 2025. And we have some of the actions here are listed. Because we are a service providing company, it's a lot about traveling for us, obviously. So one of the first steps was quite obvious, the business travel. But then we also have a lot of actions around, let's say, energy. So we have power purchase agreements that we are actually implementing. And also we will be using 100% renewable energy in all our offices by 2025. We also have the supply chain there. And I think that's what Petr mentioned and is very important. then all these initiatives, you are actually affecting the suppliers, and that's something that you mentioned as well, that it's basically then like a snow bubble and it keeps on rolling. So by this, we want to also inspire our clients. And I have to say that for us, the most positive change was internally, because our employees actually were quite excited when we announced this initiative. So they were very proud of this, and it was nice to see this reaction. So thank you very much for the attention. Very happy, and thank you, Petr, for being part of this. And I'm already looking up for all the ideas and actions that we're gonna come up together with. Thank you. And over to you.
I think we'll need EY to help us to shape the strategies, because they already know how to go about it. It's always most difficult how to start. And of course, there are different levels, a different level of details you need to deploy if you're a semi or if you're a large corporation. Thank you very much. Alice, it was very interesting. The last point of view will be from academia. We have Professor Lvington from Academy of Science, and there will be a different perspective, I suppose, from the human sociological point of view.
Thank you. So good afternoon. I'm Julia Lvington, and I'd just like to start by saying thank you for having me here today. It's quite exciting for me to see initiatives like this forming and reaching out and saying that they are interested in sustainability, rather than up to this point in my career, it's been more often that we go out and we say, hey, you need to think about sustainability. Do you want to engage with us? So this is quite exciting for me. Just as a brief introduction, so I run the Department of Human Dimensions of Global Change. That's a department that is within the Institute of Global Change Research in the Czech Academy of Sciences. And we're a department of environmental social scientists. So what that means is that we do research to understand how people and societies interact with environmental issues. And by interact, I mean how we contribute or cause environmental problems, what the impacts are to us, and how we might start to change and manage those impacts and prevent these environmental problems. So I'm standing here today, and my intention is to tell you a little bit about what the environmental social sciences know about how we create societal change and transformation. That word's been used, thank you. Transformation towards sustainability. And I am starting with the assumption that we're all on the level of accepting that this needs to happen. There are sustainability challenges, we need to address them. That's where I'm beginning. I will also start by saying, I don't know much about the world that you are all occupying. I don't come from the business sector. I've been in academia a long time. So I'm not going to try and pretend to give you concrete tips on this is what you can do, this is the measure you need to take. You have people far better able to do that in this room. But I think that what initiatives like this do and do very well is provide space for us to bring our different worldviews together and to look at the issues from different angles and bring together different inputs around that. So I'm hoping maybe some of the things I talk about today in slightly different language, you might see links. I just made a note about your pathways of sustainability, the 3 pathways. So I'm hoping that you see links to the other presenters, but maybe you see that we're presenting it or we're coming at it from a different angle. And so with that in mind, I thought that the best thing that I could do today is to introduce you to 3 core challenges that we in the environmental social sciences think that we face when we're trying to address societal change or transformation towards sustainability. Okay, so the first challenge is that sustainability issues are linked. Bear with me, sounds obvious, but bear with me. often these links aren't made explicit to us. So quite often, when we're faced with goals like the UN Sustainability Development Goals, I suspect you've all seen the Sustainable Development Goals presented as a grid, lots of different separate targets. And they are presented separately. So we see the goal about life on Earth separately to the goal about climate change and separately to the goal about education. But they're actually all related to each other. And as you can see in this figure, you could split them into the different sort of spheres of sustainability. So we have this biosphere, this natural world sphere, we have society, and we have economy. And the tiers, this nested design in this figure, is deliberate. There's a reason that it's nested like this. And that's because they are nested themselves. They're connected in this hierarchical way, in that you cannot have a sustainable economy unless you're also meeting the social, the society sustainable development goals. You also cannot have a sustainable society unless you are meeting those biosphere sustainable development goals. They cannot be separated. Furthermore, if you look at any one of these tiers, you can see that there are links within that sphere. So if we think, for example, about biodiversity and climate change, these are sort of the two big fundamental issues that we're facing, right? But they're separate sustainable development goals. There's a separate UN Convention for Climate Change and a UN Biodiversity Convention. Did you know that right now is COP15 for biodiversity? That's happening right now under that infrastructure. So there's big things happening in the biodiversity loss world as well. There's also separate intergovernmental panels looking at the science of these two issues. There's the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change and the Intergovernmental Panel for Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. So we tend to treat them separately as separate issues with separate policy frameworks. But we do know that they are linked issues. Biodiversity is not separate from climate change. This year, the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change and the Intergovernmental Panel for Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services released a joint report. So this is the cutting edge science. This is a summary of where we are at with our scientific knowledge on climate change and biodiversity. And it highlighted that climate change and biodiversity loss share common drivers, specifically overconsumption based on fossil fuel use. This was identified as a core driver of both climate change and biodiversity loss because it drives emissions. This overconsumption drives emissions, drives resource use, and drives waste. So this joint report also showed us that often solutions need to target both problems at once and can be beneficial to both problems. But that solutions that target, for example, one of these problems can have negative effects on the other. So a good example of this, I think, is carbon offsets. So this is where, for example, because you're emitting carbon dioxide, you pay to offset it somewhere else, for example, through forest growth. But that can be devastating for biodiversity, particularly, not in all cases, but particularly where a forest has been planted, a plantation forest is being used for carbon offsets, and takes over, for example, a native biodiverse landscape. That's negative for biodiversity and it's negative for local livelihoods that were perhaps interacting with that environment. So it's clear that sustainability problems are linked across these topics in this way. So that's my challenge one for today, is that we must be aware that sustainability challenges are interlinked. And we therefore need to think about how our actions and their consequences are linked. We cannot treat one problem in isolation. Addressing climate change must be about climate and biodiversity and society and. So my second challenge. My second challenge is that we need to make changes to business models and not just rely on creating different sustainable products for a subset of consumers. So this is where I would relate to Alice's path 2 and path 3 sort of thinking there. So what you can see on this model, this is the leverage points framework by Donella Meadows. So some of you may know Donella Meadows because she authored the Limits to Growth report. So really the report that put it out there that there is a limit to how much we can produce and we need to think about sustainability. I love this leverage points framework because it really helps us think through how we are trying to create change. We can consider here that we're trying to move our business system. That's my little ball there, the system. We're trying to move it in a sustainable direction, away from where it is now to greater sustainability. And we're doing that with our lever here. And so it's a really simple metaphor that we've got going on here, this leverage points framework, that you can move your business system towards sustainability by pressing on that lever. But Meadows' framework tells us that there are shallow leverage points that will only move the lever a little way. We'll perhaps get some incremental changes. Or there are deeper leverage points where you can really fundamentally move that system. But what Meadows also tells us is that these shallow leverage points are really easy to achieve. They're often tangible changes that don't really make us question the fundamentals of what we're doing. An example of this might be, for example, the introduction of sustainable fashion lines in an existing fashion retailer. It does something, it's better, that is to be applauded. But it's really tinkering at the level of materials and process. It's doing the same thing, just in a slightly different way, using slightly different materials. So that's good, but it still doesn't really address that underlying driver of climate change and biodiversity loss, that question of overconsumption of fossil fuel-based economy. So what we need is actually approaches that press deeper in this system, that press down on this level of intent, that engage with the underlying systems goals and paradigms that relate to these core underlying drivers of our problems, such as overconsumption. So we need to question these, and this is hard to do. Deep leverage points are less tangible, they're less obvious, and they require us to question the meaning of what we are doing, to really rethink business models. Can we really deliver sustainability while also relying on a business model of consumption? Can we really do this while relying on a fossil fuel-based system? It's uncomfortable to do. Maybe you're already feeling slightly uncomfortable that I'm stood here talking to you about reducing consumption in the system. This challenge, this second challenge I'm outlining, is fundamentally an issue of individual change by the consumer versus system change by the companies. In my networks, in my academic world, a question that we often discuss is whether sustainability comes from individual behavior change, so buying differently, acting differently, or from societal and economic changes. My answer to this is always, well, both. It's not either or. But we need to recognize that individual change needs to be created and supported and facilitated by broader systems change. We need these different products. We need these interventions in at these shallow levers, but we need them to be delivered within changes at these deeper levels, changes to our business models as well. And it is hard, not pretending it's simple. So if we can. And so onto my final challenge, which is actually an extension of this individual versus systems change question. And challenge 3 is that individual companies are themselves constrained by the sectors that they themselves are embedded within and by the economic systems that we're embedded within. So we're all actually in an onion. The consumers, our individual consumers, are sort of the center bit of this onion. And the way that they act, what they consume, is shaped and controlled and constrained by the next layer out of this onion, the sort of the business models, the companies and the products that they provide to them, the opportunities that they create. But your company is also constrained by further outer layers of this onion. That would be things like the broader market logic that creates, constrains the opportunities that you have to act and to make fundamental changes. Sort of a core tension here might be, for example, how can your company fundamentally change and change its business model when the rest of the sector is not changing? How do you remain economically viable? How do you make that make sense when you're the only one changing? And that's hard to do. That's hard to do as the first company to change this system. You're being pushed down against by these external forces, these outer layers of the onion. So one of my PhD students, Felix Byers, he's based in Germany. He's recently been doing some research around a sustainability initiative like this, but in the textile sector in Germany. And what we've been finding together is that increasingly the companies that we're working with are saying to us, we need more policy and regulation. We're at the limits of what we can do. They want change. They want to make their companies different. They want to act differently. But actually, they can't do that without the backing of government regulation, backing of government support. They've reached the limits of what they can do here. And they're really sort of pushing, trying to push out on these outer layers of their onion. But they need these outer layers of the onion to change so that they have more space to innovate and change and do things differently. So I promised, I mentioned that I'd talk about the Green Deal. Now we're on the Green Deal. So this is where the Green Deal should really come in to help. And the Green Deal is the European Union's sort of policy and strategy framework to deliver sustainability. It should have strategies for food systems, industrial systems, mobility, energy, the pathway towards net zero by 2050. And that really, the Green Deal should be reshaping these outer layers of the onion. So moving them out and giving you a bit more innovation space. It should give innovation space to steer all sectors and all companies further towards sustainability. It provides for reform of the circular economy that should reduce waste. It enshrines thinking about whole coherent sectors, for example, the farm to fork food system. And it also has the social element of sustainability. It's quite often in the Green Deal, you read the phrase, leave no one behind. So it's got the social element in there. So this excites me. It's moving these outer layers to provide us with space to innovate. But the Green Deal is not the answer to all sustainability problems. It really doesn't go far enough or meet my earlier challenges in many areas. One example would be the circular economy. In the Green Deal, this is very much emphasizing recycling, whereas the circular economy was always supposed to be about reduce, reuse, recycle, with the emphasis on reduce. So reduce waste, not just recycle it once you've made it. Because recycling is energy intensive. It's still a resource use. You're still based on further and further consumption in there. So with the greater emphasis on recycle in the Green Deal, that sort of weakens the innovation space to some extent there, weakens how far you can go. You might, for example, think back to that nice levers model about, okay, if we're enshrining the circular economy in this way with the emphasis on recycle, is that really a fundamental change to our system? Is it pushing on a deeper lever, or is it more on the shallow levers here? So my third challenge is that you are constrained by these outer layers of the system. You're sat in your onion. But I would encourage you, through initiatives like this, to take up as much space as you can. When those outer layers are reshaped, fill that space that it provides you to fill as quickly as possible. And I've seen a lot that makes me quite excited already today. and go further. So as an initiative like this, I think that there is potential to keep push against those outer layers. This has already been mentioned. There is opportunity, there is power in collections to say, actually, we need you to move these layers so that we can do things differently. We can change our shape. We can change our business models. So push for that. That is my third and final challenge to you. Push on the outer layers of your onion. And so I will just leave you by saying that I'm very happy to talk about any of these issues that I've talked about, or anything, these or others, environmental, social sciences, etc., either today or at a later date. But if any of you are particularly interested, we launched last week a series of environmental social science panels aimed at basically providing you information on what we know about climate change response, so how we can address the climate crisis, bringing together researchers, scientists from across the Czech Republic to do this in Czech, relevant to the Czech Republic. And that's running, our next session is tomorrow. You've already missed the first, but it's online. You can find the video on YouTube and you can watch back. You're very welcome in person, online, or at a later date to join us. Thank you very much.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I did the voting, so we have 3 winners, if you can say. So the energy transition got 25 votes. Green finance and ESG reporting has 21. Circular economy has 17. Then sustainable transport has 15, and green buildings has 14 votes.
Okay, so if I'm mistaken, the top 3 were green finance, ESG, circular economy, and energy transition.
Yes, that's correct.
So this is tentatively the topics that we would like to cover going forward. Of course, if something else comes out, we're happy to accommodate, be it transport or be it green buildings or what have you. But what we want to do with these topics, we want to organize a couple more workshop conferences like this, but be slightly more focused, with more discussion, with more speakers, again, hopefully from different angles of academia or business or what have you. And we'd like to draw some conclusions and would like to draw some recommendations for the government, because as we hear, it is important when there's a transition coming and new technologies are transformational technologies are coming, government needs to act and support. And we hope that we'll have a Czech government representative here with us next time, because last time we've organized the conference, everybody was there, World Bank was there, the UK envoy for COP26 was there, but guess what, the Czech government turned it out in the morning, so they didn't turn out. So I wish it will be better going forward. So this will be one thing, i.e. workshop and conferences with conclusions related to that sectoral question or sector. The second point, with kind permission of Ernst & Young and Spořitelna, we'd like to do something like Sustainability Award, where we would look at ideas, innovations or projects or events that you as members would propose, or indeed your customers, clients, partners, what have you. And then we would, at the end of 2022, because this program is for 2 years, it's this year and next year. So we would like to have some sort of contest, little contest with an award that would look at the sustainability. So this is the 2 initiatives we would like to take. So next steps from now will be, we will call on another event, probably prior Christmas if everybody is not too busy. We'll select one topic, we'll do a similar event, more focused, more topical, more discussion targeted, and we'll come with some recommendations for the business and for the government. The organizers, Pavel Fára and Silvia Bušňáková, would be taking your ideas, your comments, any things that you'd like to do within that group. I don't know whether your address is on the website. Is it? It's easily available. So address your comments to Silvia and Pavel. I'll be, of course, also around, and I'll be sort of coordinating the efforts. And hopefully we'll meet again sort of November, early December, before the Christmas party, if everything goes well, will happen. Okay, thank you very much for coming. It was truly a nice event and nice meeting you all. I hope to see you all and maybe more of you next time in November. And then there's I think a little refreshments in the corridor, so we can spend some time over the glass of wine and do a bit of chat and networking. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.